What's going on, guys? Johnny GB here, bringing you guys the NPA Week 3 Power Rankings, joined with my co-host, Tone. Say hi to everybody.
What is going on, everybody? You have Tone here, and we are here bringing you guys week number 3 of the Power Rankings for season number 4 of the National Pokemon Association. We do apologize, though, that we didn't get to week number 1 or week number 2 of the Power Rankings. We just had a lot of stuff on our play at the time, and we didn't really have the chance to go through the games as we would have liked to. But we are going to kick it off here with week number 3. We are trying to cut it down a lot, as opposed to not having like some big laid out video going to super in depth like the post draft. So without further ado, we're going to break down our rankings and why we do it. You know how this goes, and I hope you guys do enjoy. So for my number 24 team, starting off, we have the Southampton Sharpedos, and this was a very interesting game in the mindset of, this wasn't more so of the battle itself, it's more of how the battle really ended. Mainly because of the play where the Sharpedos were up 5-2 on the Adelaide Hunch Girls, and he went for Rain Dance with the Floatzel, expecting the Zard Y to go for Solar Beam. But looking at it, considering how a resisted flamethrower in the sun did roughly 70%, I want to say, to a Floatzel, I don't think she had a reason not to click flamethrower again, considering at that point in the game, you really didn't have to switch into Zard Y. Even more so, the fact that you actually helped the one Pokemon she had in the back, being the Keldeo, out with the rain, because the Keldeo just came in and just beat the rest of your team. Now, I know you mentioned something about sacking off, keeping your Ambipom around for the Keldeo, but I don't see how exactly Ambipom would have helped with Keldeo. It'd be more believable if it wasn't for the fact it was burned from the dust orb. So, I don't really know what the set was, what it was going to try to do, but the game for you was more so not really of your plan not working. It was more so of the timing. You did have a good idea with the Rain Dance flow, so I do give you props for that, but from there it just you kind of threw away a win by doing so. So with that,
So for my number 24, we have Crimson Seabad and the Detroit Type Nulls. Now, this game was one in which I do give props for Crimson correctly identifying the X-Bloud. Tone will get more into that when he gets into his number 23. Small spoilers. But just outside of noticing what Pokemon's team was, Crimson just wasn't actually able to put a team together to handle the X-Bloud, and then late game with the Choice Scarf Salazzle, it was not so much a lack of knowledge on Crimson Seabad's part, it just came down to prep, needing something to really take on the timid Choice Specs X-Bloud. So when you look at X-Bloud, not much safely switches into a normal Boom Burst. You can run the specially defensive Celesteela, which you haven't seen from Crimson so far in the first 3 weeks, but I can understand where he comes from with the offensive. Offensive Celesteela is a potent threat in Draft League format. It can and will sweep you given the opportunity, but in a matchup where your opponent has two very good special attackers in X-Bloud and Salazzle, seeing an offensive Celesteela probably isn't the best option for the game that week. But that is enough said. Moving on to number 23.
For number 23, I have Crimson Seabad and the Detroit Type Nulls, and this pretty much pains me a lot, especially considering how high I had them in post-draft, and looking at the battle he had against Pokemon, it was kind of painful to watch, especially considering he kept constantly saying over and over again that this was a timid choice specs exploit, and he kept playing like for some reason it wasn't. The really questionable play was him going and sacking off Mega Altaria to the Exploud boom burst, and he completely derped, even though he constantly said this was timid specs exploit. This is a timid specs exploit. And for some reason, he didn't play like it was a timid spec exploit. I actually was expecting him to bring more of a defensive, especially defensive Celesteela to try to counteract the fact that he didn't bring an exploit switch in whatsoever, which kind of confused me. I guess he really just likes running offensive the first couple of weeks, which is understandable in some sense, but I think mixing it up would help a little, and sacking off the Uxie just to get up Stealth Rock was kind of also sort of questionable, although you felt as though you didn't really need Uxie in the game. I think it would have helped you a little bit better. As you saw, it did take one hit from X-Cloud's Boom Burst, but I think you could have played it a little bit better. Tried to bring it back with the Autonomous Celesteela, but I think he just had too much problems between the X-Cloud itself, and of course, Pokemon doing a great job saving the Scarf Salazzle in the back for the late game sweep. So it's very, as much as it pains me, you just gotta right the ship, man. You gotta right the ship if you want to get back up in good faith with me. So
in at number 23 for me, I have the Southampton Sharpedos, in which Tone hit on to a lot of good points, being up 5-2 against the Adelaide Haunch Crows, and ultimately end up taking a loss is something that really should not happen late game. The Rain Dance Float Soul play that Tone hit on as his number 24 is one that, in theory, makes sense to set up the Rain against the Zard Y so that you could benefit from neutralizing its flamethrowers, solar beams, whatever you want to go with. The issue lies with the Pokemon that was left in the back, being Keldeo. Tone hit on that perfectly. The Rain Dance, again, on paper, in theory, works perfectly. Come game time, all it did was end up having you reverse swept by the own weather that you established. So it was kind of a rough thing for that to happen, to go from a 5-2 lead, probably a win. Again, it's Pokemon, a lot of stuff can happen, but ultimately taking a 2-0 loss is something that's really tough to swallow, if you want to say. It's just a tough loss to swallow, going from that 5-2 lead to a ultimate loss. Just isn't something that sits very well. It's something that now you've taken that difficult loss. Pretty much where you go from here is rebound, try to bounce back with a win the following week, which again is possible in the league. Anybody can beat anybody any given Sunday, the NFL motto. So moving on to number 22.
So, number 22, we have the Lancaster Castforms and Coach Poke. Now, I don't know much about Poke himself. He is a replacement coach in the NPA. I know he's this is his first game in the NPA in quite some time. He took on the Straw Hat Swamperets. Did play pretty well, in my opinion. There was some situations where hacks could have definitely made the differential a lot bigger, and it made it a lot worse for the Lancaster Castforms, but I do feel I'll get into that when I get there. But it's not really much I can say about this, in the sense of I haven't really seen his side of the perspective of the battle itself. I feel like this is going to be just more of a getting back into draft league format, getting back into the motions for the Lancaster Castforms. It's really going to be interesting to see how he takes this team, and I'm really interested to see where he goes from here. Not really much else I could say in regards to that. So
So number 22 for me, I have the Lancaster cast forms. Now, this is just going to be very quick going into the cast form because this game was much closer score-wise than the actual game was. This game probably should have ended with a Malamar sweep, but going from Lindemar's perspective, the only way that Malamar would have died would have been to a crit U-turn, and that actually happened to be the case, seeing as that crit was pretty much the only thing that saved Pokey from getting embarrassed by the superpower contrary Malamar with rest and knockoff, I want to say, was the other move part of that. And the hacks mattered. This game, I think, ended up in 1-0 or 2-0 with the cast forms actually almost coming back and winning, aided by the hacks. But again, I mean, this was just a game that should have been over 20 turns into the match and ended up being dragged out further than it needed to be. So, I mean, it's going to be an uphill climb. It's Pokey's first game in the NPA this season, as Tone mentioned. He is a replacement coach, so there are some things that do need to be worked on, but there is some time to actually get them fixed, and as it is early in the season. So moving on to number 21.
With that, we move on. I'm going to move on to my number 21 team, and I have the Tampa Bay Lux Rays. Now, the Lux Rays, like I said, from post-draft, it was the rain team. I knew it was going to be a little bit of an issue trying to change up the formula here without having to bring a dedicated rain. He did have some he had some decent sets here, here and there, but I think it was more so the fact of, and it's not really, it was sort of interesting to say the least. It was more so of like trying to, like, the Outrage Mega Swampert really surprised me, to be perfectly honest. Like, when you see a Mega Swampert, you're thinking Waterfall, you're thinking Ice Punch, you're thinking Earthquake, Power Up Punch here and there. Outrage is the last move I was thinking of. Even more so that he went for it in the face of the fact that Papa C still had a Tapu Fini in the back. So I don't know if it was a ballsy play or he just wanted that Goodra out of the way. But all the more so, I'm not really gonna get on the Tampa Bay Lux Rays case in this case. It just sucks that it really came down to at the end of him trying to hit some stone edges on the Fortress, and then you have to hit stone edges on the Trevenant and the Mega Absol, and of course he did miss both of those stone edges on the Fortress, which did result in the loss. So nothing really much else to say in that regard.
So for my 21st, not birthday, but in the power rankings, we have, similar to Tone, the Tampa Bay Lux Rays. Now, a lot of what you're going to see on this Week 3 power rankings is very similar, as we're starting to see the cream of the crop slowly start to rise, but there is this middle ground with a lot of teams and very similar records. So, for me, the Tampa Bay Lux Rays. Tone did hit on one set that a lot of people probably noticed and was a little confused by. That was the Outrage Mega Swampert. You know what? Curse, Earthquake. I'm kind of okay with that being under Swift Swim, so I mean, no complaints there. Some of the complaints I did have on this were the Bronzong. So you have Bronzong with Trick, Gyro Ball, Choice Scarfed, Stealth Rocks. And it was a ballsy set. I would say it was a very, very creative set. And it backfired when he tried to trick the Scarf onto Mega Absol, and it ended up failing. That right there is part of that double-edged sword that trick Bronzong was. If it did work, and did, I believe he was trying to cripple Trevenant. So, I mean, if it did end up working and it got the Trevenant, great, but it ended up backfiring, and it's kind of blessing slash you're going to end up on the not top plays if you end up messing something up like that. Had it worked, we would have praised him, but it didn't work, and now we're pretty much just ridiculing it being a bad set. It's just how that ends up actually working. Other thing I took that wasn't very fortunate for him were the Stone Edge misses late in the game. Although I believe Absol still had Sucker Punch, so it was going to be very hard for Fortress to actually go in and... not Fortress. Hard for Heracross to go in and finally complete the sweep, but it still was doable had he been able to get rid of the Fortress with one of the two Stone Edges he missed. Lesson, kids, run Rock Throw. It'll hit. But now moving on to number 20.
So, for my number 20 team, we have Old Man Tup and the Pittsburgh Piratas, another team I had very highly on the post-draft rankings. Now, this was one of the more this is a very nail-biting battle in the sense of going up against Galactic Elliott and Chicago Cub Shoes. I really feel as though he had the opportunity to win, and it mainly just came down to some very, very unfortunate rolls, and not just one, but two of them. With the Don Fan living on 1 HP or 2 HP from Zygarde Choice Banded Extreme Speed, and the Tapu Koko living Life Orb E-Speed from the Lucario to unfortunately give Tup a loss. I do like the beginning of the battle for Tup on how he played Lurantis and really throwing Elliott off his guard at the beginning. The Superpower Leaf Blade Tech did throw Elliott for a loop at the beginning. So I'm not going to penalize or hinder Tup's rankings just because of that. Despite the fact he is 0-3, I do feel as though he has getting a better grasp of his team. He is one of those types of people that can run very, very unpredictable sets, and I really do appreciate that a Pokemon like Lurantis is getting a lot of appreciation in league format and for this team, and he really showed it, putting in a lot of work against Elliott, picking up 2 solid kills.
So in at number 20, matching tones number 20, I do have the Pittsburgh Piratas now. This was a loss that made me feel sad because it felt like Tup was in control pretty much the entire game. Very early on in the game, Elliott and him were pretty much attack for attack. They were doing the things they were supposed to do. And then it got to the point where Tup started to get Lurantis set up, and now Elliott started to be thrown off his game. And at one point it looked like Lurantis was going to clean up and sweep the game until it was swapped out by, forced out by Mismagius. Now, not sure from Tup's side why he hard swapped, but in hindsight and my perspective, could have been a choke, seeing as Lurantis was fully set up. Maybe he didn't kill with Leaf Blade, etc., etc. A lot of things that go on that explains why I'm in the analyst spot and he's in the player spot. But he still managed to almost come back late in the game. Donphan living on 1 HP from the Choice Banded Extreme Speed from Zygarde, and then Tapu Koko with the investment that Elliott on his side ended up saying was like 140 into HP. So the HP investment helped live an Extreme Speed from Lucario in what could have been an epic comeback for Tup, but it's just a saddening loss. I felt like Tup played very well, and hopefully he can translate that good play he had this week and try to pick up a win next week to end his losing streak. But moving on to number 19.
On to my number 19 team. So my number 19 team, I have the Cedar Rapids Thunderous. So this was another interesting game More so on the fact that it was not really the prep, it was more of the tech that really hindered the Sea Raptor Thunder. It's more so the first two turns of the battle where he was trying to get up webs with the Galvantula, and then he got stunted on by a Life Orb fake out plus hidden power of fire, a Alolan Persian, and there's nothing you can really say you can really do when it comes to that sense. He did do a good job in bringing the game back. However, there were not really instances where the match could have hindered gone either way. I think another interesting thing was the fact that he was a special variant of Charizard X. I still think that DD or even like Flame Charge could have been a little bit more interesting, but I know he has his reasons for running what he did, and even so, Kelly did make sure that a boosted Charizard X was not going to be an issue in this game. So overall, I do like the improvement of the Sea Raptor Thunder as he is doing a lot better with his team. He's a lot better at his prep. I am more and more impressed when I looked at his battles, so I can't.
In at number 20 or 19, correction. My number 19 is the Cedar Rapid Thunderous, much like Tone. Again, these are going to be very similar. So Tone did hit on a few things that the Cedar Rapid Thunderous struggled with. One being the anti-lead Galvantula. Very good prep on his opponent's part, thinking that he was going to try to get up webs. Instead, he brought that fake out HP Fire Alolan Persian. Very, very good set, being that anti-lead Galvantula. And especially with the fact that Galvantula does have a type advantage over the Alolan Persian. It was just the tech for the sticky webs, and it ended up backfiring on the Thunderous, and the other one was the special Charizard X. Yes, Charizard X does have relatively decent special attack, but Tone did hit on it that Dragon Dance probably was a better set for the game, and there's some improvement over the last couple weeks, and there just could be a little bit more improvement that could be made for this team to potentially pick up quite a few wins, maybe rattle off a nice little winning streak here later on in the year with the improvements and the changes that he can make to this team. But I mean, again, we're 3 weeks into the season. There is still some time to correct these mistakes. Again, this is just a learning experience. These first couple weeks trying to get used to your team. But now moving on to number 18.
So my number 18 team, we have King Bub and the Munchlaxter United. So looking at this game, looking at the matchup, and I'm seeing he brought a very, very, very nice offensive team with the Megalopony, and then he had the Bulk with the Palossand and the Tangrowth and the Suicune, and it looked all very well and good, except for the main factor of, well, Webs did get up on Bub's side, and even more so, he didn't have a switch into Freeze Dry from the Cryogonal, which I actually found interesting, but it's not like you can really prep for everything your opponent brings. Like Choice Specs, Cryogonal was a break bring, which I'll get into when I get to Kale, but more so, I think it was more of the fact that once Webs were up, it really hindered Bub a lot. I don't know what this. I think the Sigilyph was trying to go for defog. I haven't seen Bub's side of the battle yet, so I don't really know what his play would have been had it not been for the Freeze Dry freezing the Sigilyph there. But I think overall, it was just more of a prep sort of thing. But again, I'm not going to hold it against Bub. You don't really see Choice Specs Cryogonal in format that often, so I'm not going to hold that much against him.
So at number 18, I also have the Munchlaxter United. Now, for similar reasons to Tone, this wasn't in terms of him playing poorly. He played pretty well the entire game. It came down to prep. And shout out to Kyle A. If I butcher it again, he's going to get pissed off at me. But there wasn't much on Bub's team for that choice specs cryogonal. Now, it was threatened by the Megalopony, but the webs got up, so it was able to slow the Megalopony. And with a team with Suicune, Sigilyph, and Tangrowth, that is choice spec cryogonal food. Now, Tone is hitting the nail there, where it's not a common set, but it is something to be aware of. Cryogonal, good speed, solid special attack, ability to hit water types for super effective damage. Just really wasn't planned for on Bub's part. And his bulk is there. He has the offense with Lopunny, so he's just needs to find a way to finish up a game and pick up a win. And then I think momentum will start shifting his way, because he does have a lot of good bulk on his team that are pretty much just cornerstones on a lot of drafts. So I expect him to turn this around here in the coming weeks.
So for my number 17 team, we have In Vivid Color and the South Texas Sableyes. This was pretty much the most, well, the word I'm looking for is is escaping me, but it was pretty much as close of a battle as you can get, because it literally just came down to 1 HP, and Vivid did a very solid job in this battle, preserving the Alolan Dugtrio towards the end and forcing A-Drive to use his Scarf Salamence a lot faster than he had anticipated, and getting himself into a position where Alolan Dugtrio could potentially have brought back the game. Z Stone Edge was a good bring on Vivid's part, just to ensure that Stone Edge does not miss a boosting Salamence at the very least. But it stings a lot to see from Vivid's side to see that Weezing live on 1 HP. Nevertheless, I did give Vivid props for bringing it back, although I will say that it was more so some misprep or misplaying on A-Drive's part that did contribute to the game sort of turning out the way it did with the way he played the Salamence. But overall, I did enjoy watching Vivid's side.
So for my number 17, we have In Vivid Color and the South Texas Sableyes. Now, a heartbreaking loss for Vivid this week against A-Drive. Not being able to pick up that kill on the Continental Crush was just absolutely devastating. It was a battle in which both coaches played very well, and both coaches had moments in which they played very poorly. So it was something that needed a bit of luck there at the end for Vivid, with the Weezing living on 1 HP after the Continental Crush. But looking at some of the other moments in the game, that, Vivid did play well. Prep-wise, having the Stone Edge on the Volcanion for Salamence, very good. Pursuit on Tyranitar for the Victini. Unfortunate A-Drive did not remember about it, but it was a very good play on Vivid's part. Now, for the bad side of it, letting Alakazam get weakened because of the substitute plays. You look at it and they make sense. Can't risk Mawile going for Sucker Punch and picking up a KO against Alakazam. But when you look at the position A-Drive was in, he did not want to let Alakazam start setting up those subs for free. And Vivid was not really able to recognize the fact that Alakazam could just knock out the Mawile in the position that A-Drive was in, not wanting it to get behind a sub. And then just the end game was the unfortunate part. In the closest match this week, pretty much a 1-0 win with 1 HP remaining on Weezing was the difference in Vivid not being able to pick up a win. Had he picked up a win, he probably would have ended up higher on the power rankings, but able to bounce back here in the future. Lots of games left, and that's what matters here. Is played one of the undefeated teams in the league pretty hard, almost picked up a win, so should be able to pick up a bunch of confidence from the play he had this week.
the battle. No, not going to lie there. So for my number 16 team, we have Sleepy Knight and the Montreal 2 Canadiens coming off of a very impressive win over Jodor and the Seattle Sea Kings. And this is one of those games looking at the matchup, and this was really just Kyle being Kyle, and Kyle with a Necrozma means death for the opponent, and when your opponent has no dark type, you can expect this Necrozma to run this sort of set. Now, I know he said that he didn't feel right about running Iron Defense, Calm Mind, Necrozma, but hey, you gotta do what you gotta do when it comes to trying to pick up that W, and he took advantage of the situation. You got the opportunity to set up the Iron Defense in front of the Mega Medicham, get to +4 defense, get up that Calm Mind, and you really just plow through his team. It started off pretty slow for you. You thought you were going to get swept by that Kartana, but you brought it back within the Necrozma. Very solid win, a very nice bounce back win for the Montreal 2 Canadiens. Nothing more I can say about that. Just very, very solid work with the Necrozma, as always, by Sleepy Knight.
So in at number 16, I as well have the Montreal 2 Canadiens and their coach, Kyle or Sleepy Knight, and it was a very good win. Never in my life would I have thought a Mega Medicham would become setup fodder, but in this case against the Seattle Sea Kings, Mega Medicham was a setup fodder for the Necrozma. This basically fell on the part that Joe had no dark type brought on the team, and no dark type means the stored power Necrozma set with all the variants. The one Kyle brought was the Calm Mind, Iron Defense, stored power Moonlight. There's the, I believe, Rock Polish or Autotomize sets as well with Iron Defense. So this was just the ideal set for Sleepy Knight to bring, and it showed that it put in the work. There was nothing that Jader had for it and Joder had for it, and it showed by the Necrozma sweep there at the end of the game. There was nothing to be done, and it's a very good win for a team that was struggling the first couple weeks, but now has a win versus a 2-0 team to add to their momentum.
So, number 15, I have the Straw Hat Swamperts, and let me just say that the Hax Gods do not like this man whatsoever. The Trap God has done nothing wrong. I really don't understand what is going on. He got the win over the Lancaster cast forms, but the differential should definitely have been a lot higher. He brought some very solid tech. Whirlpool, Seismic Toss, Mega Blastoise was a very solid bring. I know he wanted to use it more on the Tentacruel, but it did have some nice usefulness in whittling down the Arcanine and whatnot. This definitely, like I said, it would have been a lot bigger win, but unfortunately the Yancy missed a Diamond Storm on the Mega Aerodactyl, which did cost him some differential there. So yeah, this was more so like it would have been a lot cleaner game, but for some reason Hax just doesn't want Lindemar to enjoy Pokemon for some reason, but I give him props all the same for picking up a solid win over one of the newcomers, or one of the returning coaches for the NPA, for some of you who do know Poke. So
in at number 15, I have the Miami Dolphins and their coach, Kyle A. Now, Kyle played a very good match. He brought sets that benefited him that his opponent really wouldn't expect. You saw that with the Assault Vest Crawdaunt for Greninja. Tone will hit on that a little bit more when he gets to the Donphans. But for me, the Cryogonal was such a good bring, seeing as it did so much versus a lot of the bulk that Bub had. It checks Suicune that's not set up. It takes on Tangrowth. It has a good matchup versus Sigilyph with the special defense. I'm not sure if Heat Wave or Defog on the turn they got frozen could really stop Cryogonal, but the freeze was unfortunate on Bub's end. So with that, we will be moving on to number 14.
For number 14, we have Kyle and the Miami Dolphins, and this was one of those games where this is one of the games where you really this is pretty much what I expect when you see Kyle's sort of offensive builds and whatnot. Choice Specs Cryogonal was a very solid bring on Kyle's part, absolutely decimating Bub's team considering he did not bring a solid switch into Choice Specs Freeze Dry whatsoever. The free, like I said before, with the Much Laster United, the freeze on the Sigilift, the focus at Sigilift did suck. I don't know what he would have went for. I'm assuming he would have went for Defog, probably Heat Wave. It's not really I don't really know what he would have did at that point in time, but nonetheless, it was a very solid win on Kale's part, even to the point of bringing in Assault Vest Crawdon as his Greninja check, which was another solid bring on his part. But overall, Kale did play very, well, not really safe, but he made the right plays at the right time, and Cryogonal put in a ton of work in that game. So not really surprising to see Kale finally bouncing back and getting that win, getting him that start that he needs. So yeah.
In at number 14 for me, I have the Straw Hat Swamperts. Now, this game was one that should have been a lot more dominant than it was. Again, Tone pointed this out when he had them at 15. The Hax Gods do not like Lindemar, and it's been evident so far these first 3 weeks in the season. He missed the 95% accurate Diamond Storm on Mega Aerodactyl. He had his Malamar critted on a U-turn, which was the only way that Malamar would have died, which was already, I believe, up to +4, +5. So, I mean, it was set up to sweep there. It almost ended up losing the game to RNG late there. So, for him to pretty much persevere and get over all that bad luck in this game and pick up a win was impressive on its own. Now, hopefully he can manage to pick up a hacksless win or find a way to not lose a game due to hacks, and he should be climbing up because he did bring some interesting sets. The Whirlpool, Seismic Toss, Blastoise for the Tentacruel. Very smart bring, as Tentacruel can't do much except maybe Toxic or something along those lines, so he did have the rest, I believe, for that. So hopefully he can manage to play a game in week 4 without being critically screwed over by any type of RNG. But now moving on to number 13.
Now, for my number 13 team, we have Jodor and the Seattle Sea Kings, and this was a little bit of a pain. This was a little bit painful to watch, especially from Jodor's side. Because I'm thinking, when I see the team preview, I'm looking at the builder and whatnot, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so his main response to Necrozma is just trying to toxic Necrozma with the Kangaskhan. I'm assuming, I'm looking at it, I'm thinking in the back of my head, Necrozma is a real menace for your team. I'm thinking you would bring something more for the Necrozma, like Toxic. I'm thinking Mega Metachan was going to have Toxic because Necrozma is always going to come in, or is always going to want to try to come in on a Mega Metachan, considering that Mega Metachan can't break bulky Psychics. And another thing I was actually expecting was probably either Toxic or Taunt on the Comfey, which he did say he did regret because he put Defog instead, but having that extra Toxic or Taunt user to prevent Necrozma from sweeping you in the late game would definitely have helped you out a lot better in this performance. So, didn't have to knock you down a few positions because of that, but overall it is something that you can bounce back from. This is only your first loss, so nothing really much else to say about that. It's just kind of unfortunate that you undermined the power of Necrozma, especially considering your team in particular with no dark type Pokemon making that sort of set possible to run against you. But that's going to be it for the Seattle Sea Kings.
At number 13, we have Joder and the Seattle Sea Kings, who ended up having that upsetting loss for Joder's perspective. It was a very upsetting loss in terms of end up having being swept by the dual dance, stored power, Necrozma. And when you look at it, both played very well early game. I felt Joder had more of the advantage until the Mega Metacham became the setup fodder for the Iron Defense Calm Mind Necrozma, which ultimately led to Joder's downfall. I feel like this loss shouldn't affect him too much, just falls to 2-1. There is a plethora of teams that are sitting at 2-1 that all have the potential to be towards the top of the standings after next week. So it's not a loss that's going to throw away Joder's season, because it's week 3. There's still a lot of season left, but you don't want to get too far behind on some of the top teams in the league this early. You can't win the season early on, but you can lose it. So hopefully Joder is able to rebound going into week 4.
So for my number 12 team, we have Cressel Key and the Adelaide Honchcrows, and this, going back to what I said at the beginning, was just more so of the fact that she was helped out a lot by Southampton Sharpedo setting up the rain, getting her in the position where Keldeo comes in and reverse swept the Sharpedo's team, which did suck, considering the fact that that Goffies did have that full HP Skunk Tank, and Hydro Pump wouldn't have killed Skunk Tank from full if the rain was not up. So he basically set up his own demise. Nonetheless, Keldeo could have missed Hydro Pump, to be fair, but that was not the case, and this was one of those games where the comeback could have been avoided, but again, it was more so of the timing of the rain dance by the Floatzel, and more so preserving the Keldeo in the back to come in and do what it did. I know she was not expecting that to happen, but I mean, what can you do? I mean, when you get the situation where stuff like rain, where the rain is up, unintentionally or otherwise, you just you gotta roll with it, and she did, and she came out on top despite being down 2-5. She pulled out the win, so all the props to Crest for that. She's really upped her game these last few weeks. So
for number 12, we do have the Adelaide Honchcrows, who managed to pull off an epic comeback, being down 5-2, and was aided by the unfortunate events of the rain dance being set up by the Southampton Sharpedo's Floatzel, which in turn led to a reverse sweep. It was a game in which, if the rain doesn't get set up, Keldeo probably doesn't go in and sweep the rest of the game, but capitalizing on opponents' mistakes is something that you have to do in any type of competition. If you don't capitalize on their mistakes, you aren't going to win, and Cress managed to capitalize on the Sharpedo's mistake of setting up that rain dance, which, again, it wasn't a bad play per se. It was just ill-timed, and that ill-timed rain dance let Cress go in and finish up just a dramatic comeback in week 3 here. But now moving on to number 11.
My number 11, we have the Rochester Ride-Ons. Now this was a pretty tough game for the most part. The main thing this game came down to was the confusion on the Terrakion after getting hit by Mega Pidgeot's Hurricane, and he unfortunately hit himself confusion, which unfortunately led to Terrakion going down, and that was pretty much, if I recall correctly, the only thing I think Terrakion was the only response that Boffin had for the Blissey, and I think more so for the Celia. So trying to battle back without your hard hitter in the Terrakion was definitely it definitely sucked for the most part. But at the very least, you did try to bring it back. You didn't give up, so I'm not going to knock you too much for that. And like I said, it was only your first loss. There's going to be those games where things don't go your way. I know Linda Morrow has something else to say about that, but nonetheless, you still played very, very well despite the confusion hacks happening, and you really I can't talk right now, but really you can only go up from here as far as I'm concerned. You have a very solid team, so don't let this one loss get you down, if anything. So moving on.
At number 11, we have the Rochester Rhydons, who Tone hit on quite a few points there with the Terrakion being switched in on to a Hurricane from Tornadoes. On top of that, getting confused and hitting yourself in confusion. It's unfortunate events, and it's still early in the year. It's with a good team. Good teams, good players are able to rebound after a loss, so I really expect the Rhydons to bounce back, pick up a win in week 4, and try and make sure to not start a slump, because one of two things can happen. A loss like this, you can fall back into that slump, or you rebound and win in pretty dominant fashion the next week. So hopefully the Rhydons can manage to have that bounce back win and advance to 3-1. First loss in the season. If you go undefeated, it's great, but everybody should be expecting to take at least one loss at least one point in the season, so you shouldn't be overly disappointed in this effort this week.
So my number 10, we have the Tapu Koko Puffs. One of the surprises for me, at least. This is one of the teams that I had low in my post-draft rankings, just because it was a VGC player adjusting to singles competitive format, and I didn't really know what to expect, but he really came, surprised a lot of people, and he's 3-0. So give credit where credit is due. As I already mentioned, it did suck with the Mega Pidgeot getting the Hurricane confusion on the Terrakion, and then the Terrakion hit itself in confusion and causing it to knock itself out. But for the most part, Tapu Koko Puffs has done a very solid job with this team. More so, his use of not only his defense being the Blissey and the Cresselia, two annoying things that should never be together on the same team, but it's more so of how he managed the end game, getting into a situation where Darmanitan could come in and clean up at the end. So props to Tapu Koko Puffs there for bringing a very solid team and having one of the better starts in the NPA. This was a very surprising team for me, and I'm actually very glad to see them doing so well, in my opinion.
So at number 10, we have the Tapu Koko Puffs, very similar to Tone, and being pretty amazed that a VGC player is really making the transition very well into the Draft League format. Again, we did touch on the hacks with the Hurricane plus confusion plus hitting yourself that he had against the Rhydons, but for the most part, playing very well. And this is where you see some of the VGC players maybe having an edge is understanding late game positions or pretty much how to win any type of Pokemon game. And that served him very well, making sure that he kept Darmanitan sitting in the back, weaken his opponent's team, use his defensive core that, again, Tone and I don't like it, but Blissey plus Cresselia, it works defensively, and then managed to just clean up at the end late game with the Darmanitan. His skill as a player is very good. Everybody, including myself and Tone, were very skeptical on a VGC player and how they would fare in the Draft League format. And so far, with the 3-0 record, climbing up the power rankings, he is doing a pretty fine job at that.
So my number 9 team is the Orlando Magikarp, and this was one of the more enjoyable games between the Orlando Magikarp and the Colorado Rapidash, just because of the fact that despite the loss, he brought some very, very cool sets. I really like to see the Sun with the Venusaur and the Ninetales in this game. Even more so was the fact that he definitely surprised me bringing that special choice scarf Entei with eruption. Although the fun was ended by the choice scarf Inferno, it was still a very, very cool game. There wasn't really much hacks to go on. It was a pretty clean game nonetheless, and despite this being your first loss, I still think you can do a lot better. I don't really have anything bad to say about your team. You played solidly, despite the fact that you said that you felt like you did choke there towards the end, but I didn't really see how exactly. But nonetheless, you played well. There's really not much I could say in regards to that. You brought some fun stuff. You utilized the sun. I gave you props before for drafting it, and I'm really glad to see you utilizing it to the best of your abilities. And I'm excited to see where you can take this team, despite this being your first loss. This is still a very, very dangerous team to take on, in my opinion.
At number 9, we have the Orlando Magikarp. Now, the Magikarp played a very good game. The downsides of why I have them falling a little bit. Yes, one, they lost, so they're going to fall from where I would have had them had we done week 2 power rankings. But he made very predictable plays, which helped his opponent very early. So it was a very good game, very entertaining game, both sides, but the predictable play let his opponent capitalize on very easy reads. So stuff with the Thunder Wave, with switching into Rotom, very good. The Thunder Wave was a very good play on the Mega Gyarados, but with the bulk being found out on the U-turn, it pretty much showed that he's kind of a support Gyarados. So he gave away what his set was very early on in the battle and made it very easy for the Rapidash to actually bounce back and pick apart the Orlando Magikarp. But still a very good game. No reason to be discouraged. Both coaches played very well in this form. Somebody has to lose, and when you lose, more than likely you're going to fall in the power rankings. That's all this really is.
So for me, my number 8 team, we have the Chicago Cubchus, which were my number 1 team, but has fallen down to number 8. So for the Chicago Cubchus, this going back to the game against Tup, this really just came down to more so the end game, of course, with the rolls on the Donphan and the Tapu Koko. Rock Polished Donphan was a very solid bring on Elliott's part. He was on the back foot very early on in the game, really taken back by that physical contrary Lurantis with Superpower and Leaf Blade, forcing Elliott to sack off my Lotec a lot sooner than he would have liked to. But at the very least, he was able to bring it back. He got some very, very fortunate rolls on his Donphan and the Koko, which led to the victory in his favor. Overall, there's really not much I could say about this, other than some people might say he got lucky because of the rolls, but at the very least, it wasn't a hacksy battle. I mean, the Leaf Blade crit didn't really matter that much under my low tick, considering to Elliott, it was more so a sack. But I think this is more of a learning experience just for Elliott, just to get accustomed to these lower tier mons, and now he knows exactly what a Lurantis is and what it can do if you don't prep for.
So in at number 8, I also have Elliott and the Chicago Cubchus. Now, this game between Tup and him was one that was the definition of back and forth. So very early, you had the loss of Mega Garchomp, so that was good on Tup getting the right matchup of Garchomp versus Lurantis. You can call it a choke on Tup's part, is where Elliott benefited from swapping out the already set up Lurantis again. I was unable to watch Tup's side, so I am not sure
whether Mismagius could have been able to take it out, but it was just a very questionable play, seeing as Elliott was unaware of what Lurantis can do. And then you look at late game, the HP that Elliott goes on to explain in his video was the turning point for Tapu Koko, which allowed it to live the extreme speed. The roll came on the Donphan. Had Donphan fallen, Elliott does end up taking the loss because Koko cannot take a banded extreme speed from Zygarde. And if it were to take one from Zygarde, it does not take another one from the Lucario late in the game. So he played well. The Rock Polish Donphan was a great set. When it was set up, it did dominate. Tup's team had very good matchup for the rest of the game. Again, just benefited from those two rolls late in the game with the extreme speeds. So he should be on the way up. Tone did have him at number 1. I had him about 10. So, I mean, he's climbing back up to where I originally had him in the post-draft. But it was a good game on both parts. They both played very well. Elliott just managed to make those plays or capitalize on Tup's mistakes late in the game, but should be able to pick up another win week 4 to keep this momentum going this season.
So for my number 17, we have Papa C and the New York Lynx. He come off a very solid win over the Tampa Bay Luxrays, and this game was more so. It pretty much came down to, well, he had some very, very interesting sets. Mainly, Sunny Day Trevenant to counteract the rain was a solid bring on his part. I think overall, the general basis of Papa C's team was very well structured into trying to counteract the Luxray's rain. Bringing the Tapu Fini, bringing the Fortress as a stop to the Mega Swampert. I know he was taken back by the outraged Mega Swampert, as I said, but overall, I believe Papa C did do enough to the point where he had the game clearly in the bag with the Mega Absol on the back. So, props to Papa C for bringing some quality stuff. I really was impressed with the way he handled the Tampa Bay Luxrays, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see how well he can do going into the mid part.
At number 7, I as well have Papa C and the New York Lynx. Now, he prepped his Fortress for the Mega Swampert, which was very good part having the Giga Drain on the Fortress, which threw the Luxrays off a little bit. But overall, he played just a very balanced game. He did benefit differential-wise from the Stone Edge misses on the Fortress, which allowed Fortress to pick up the KO on Mega Heracross. But when you look at some of the other things that came into play, he kept the Absol in the back, which once Fortress was weakened, it pretty much just allowed once Heracross was weakened, I got those two confused just because they're Gen 2 bugs. But once he got the Heracross weakened to the point where Absol Sucker Punch killed, well, yes, the Heracross could, in theory, have won, but Papa C having the Sucker Punch on the Absol would have just narrowed the differential from what it was. So, just balanced play, brought very good mons to counter the rain, like Tone said. Still struggled early game with the Heracross. It just came down to what move would the Luxrays actually go for with the Heracross. And for Papa C, he benefited with having the bulk of Fini and blanking on the name, Trevenant, to really just take on. Very good Trevenant set with the Sunny Day to take on the rain. So, expecting Papa C to really keep the momentum that he has now, moving to 2-1, trying to crawl into the top 5 of the power rankings here going into week 4. Now moving on to number 6.
For number 6, I have Redithin and the Nashville Predators. Now this was more of an interesting matchup between him and 6-foot Hacks and the Durham Jordigons, more so in the fact that this was a winnable matchup. I didn't penalize Ethan much because of the way he played. It was more so the end game. He didn't know what exactly the Mammoth Swine set was, but I think for the most part, as he said, I think he should have did a much better job trying to preserve the air balloon on the Cabalion. He sent in the Blacephalon a lot earlier to get the kill on the Manaphy instead of going into Superior, and then of course he didn't get that roll. He got crit the last turn on the Earthquake from Mamoswine, where he said that T-Tar, the Mega T-Tar, was easily going to live a Earthquake from a Jolly Max attack. Mamoswine, from the range of HP it was at, and he would have killed it with a low kicks, but he got crit. But nonetheless, it was a very, very close 1-0 game. Really enjoyable match to watch, to be sure. And I still think Ethan is one of the more underappreciated coach. Some people might say his team is a little bit too all over the place, but I like the structure. I think that he has done a great job so far in the 3 weeks, using the Blacephalon, using his team to the best of his abilities, and it's very interesting to see how Ethan will keep going with this squad. So, despite the fact that this was a 1-0 loss, in general, this was a very, very good game in my opinion. So for my
number 6, I have the Nashville Predators. Played a very good game against 6-foot Hacks and the Durham Druddigons. So some things that did hurt the Predators were the critical hit on the Tyranitar. So, I mean, that was one thing that hurt the Predators, as the low kick would have killed the Mamoswine, but played very well with Scarf Blacephalon. You also had the Magic Bounce from Xatu on the Sticky Webs actually benefit Superior, giving it the +1 speed, which made it an extreme threat to Leo's team. And then the one thing that was an issue was the Air Balloon Cabalion. Felt like Tone touched on it a bit, but he could have preserved it a little bit better, because I said this in the post-draft power rankings, they are extremely weak to ground types. Superior is the one ground resist on the team, so he needed to bring a creative way to deal with the Mamoswine, and one of the ways was the Sticky Webs, which unfortunately ended up backfiring with the Magic Bounce. And the other thing was no electric resist this week, so the Rotom Volt Switch worked out very well, as it pretty much came in and it clicked Volt Switch anytime it came in, which allowed Leo to get momentum. So that was one downside, but again, not knocking them much. They're way higher than what I had them post-draft power rankings. Redithan's using the team very well and should be one of the top 4 teams come the end of the season.
Top 5. Starting with number 5, we have the Colorado Rapidash. In a game, like I said, one of the more enjoyable games to watch between them and the Orlando Magikarp. Very solid bring on the Colorado Rapidash's part with the Cloud9 Licky Licky, although it didn't really play much of a factor considering how early it fainted in the battle, but it was more so the fact that he really preserved his win con, keeping that Scarf Infernape in the back until he was sure that all he had left was a Sun, and having that Sun boosted Flare Blitz to clean up in the late game, and even having the presence of mind to preserve differential towards the end. Very solid plays by the Colorado Rapidash. She off to a great 3-0 start. One of the more underrated teams, I feel. I know I had him ranked pretty low, but after watching the first 3 weeks, I am very, very impressed by his prep and by his play, not going to lie. So for my number 4 team, we have the Maryland Torterrapins and Coach Under the Radar. And Under the Radar, really, really, really solid prep by him in this game against the Cedar Rapids Thunderous. More so With the last minute changes he made to his team to make sure that, for one, webs were not going to be a issue or something to worry about in this game, and number two, having something just in case that Mega Charizard X got out of hand. So very good prep by Kelly with the fake out Hidden Power Fire Technician Life Orb Alolan Persian. That's a mouthful to say, but that was a very, very solid prep by Kelly. Very solid lead to get rid of the Galvantula right off the bat to make sure that he did not have to deal with webs. Very solid bring with the Scarf Bombi just to ensure that a potential boosted Charizard X would not be the downfall of your team. Same thing with the special Lando T, changing it. Kind of funny how seeing that the Lando got burned, and if he remained physical, it would have been a lot more of a hindrance. But nonetheless, this was a very solid win for you. This was a very solid game in general. You executed your game plan almost perfectly. I know you said you wanted to see your bulk up Mega Heracross do a lot more work, but I feel like the opportunity will come, and you're still one of the best coaches in the league. Can't deny that. You have a very solid team. Despite the fact you are 2-1, you are still pretty ranked highly in my boards. That's why I have you at number 4. So for number 3, I have 6-foot Hacks and the Durham Druddigons. So this is more so the Leo I expect to see after what happened week 1. I know that's not the Leo I see that I've seen and watched for all this time. He's definitely had those situations where things don't go well for him, but the end game for Leo was definitely surprising. I know that he was taken back by the air balloon Cobalion, but he was able to break it with the Manaphy. It lived the +2 close combat from the Cobalion, broke the balloon, and put it in a position to where the Mamoswine could come in and click Earthquake for free. I know I already talked about how Ethan said that the Mega T-Tar was going to live Earthquake no matter what, so the crit did matter a lot more than it should have, but I do feel like Leo has one of the better teams in the league. Manaphy put in a good amount of work, and preserving that Mamoswine for the end was a very, very solid part by Leo. He has definitely one of the scariest drafts, and seeing him now getting on a Nitro 2-game winning streak is a very, very nice thing to see as far as I'm concerned. It was a very solid match. The last turn crit did sort of suck because we didn't know for sure if low kick would have killed, but I think it was a very, very solid game nonetheless by both Leo and by Ethan. Now for my number 2 team, and we have A-Drive and the Minnesota Vikavolt in one of the games where even the man himself, A-Drive, will admit he did not deserve to win, but his wheezing said otherwise. Living that Z-Stone Edge from the Alolan Doug trio on 1 HP and taking out the Doug trio with the Hidden Power Ice. I know he said towards the end that he did kind of choke the game by forcing himself to go for the Earthquake, I believe it was, that he went for on the Haxorus to force him to take him out, and then he goes into Silvally to revenge kill the Haxorus, and then the Doug trio comes to revenge kill the Silvally, and then it came down to the wheezing Alolan Doug trio scenario. I know he said he wanted to play that sort of end game a little bit differently, but regardless, it was still one of the more enjoyable matches. Definitely had me on the edge of my seat throughout the entire match on both sides. It really could have gone either way. A crit or an Ironhead flinch would have definitely swung the tide of the battle in either your favor or Vivid's favor. So despite the fact that you feel like you didn't deserve the win, nonetheless, a win is a win. At least it didn't end in like a crit or something. So nothing really much else to say about that. And for my number 1 team, we have Pokemon and the New Orleans Pelipers in a game which kind of just boils down to Pokemon having the matchup from turn 1, putting the pressure on Crimson's team with the timid Choice Specs Exploud, putting a dent in his entire team, getting up the rocks with the Mudstale, facing his team around with Roar. It was a very planned out and methodical plan by Pokemon, all leading up to the late game save by the Scarf Salasso once Crimson revealed the weakness policy autotomized Celesteela in the back as a last resort. But I think this was more so less about Chase's abilities and more so of Pokemon planning out a strategy and executing it to perfection. This is pretty much open and shut game as far as I'm concerned. There was no hacks to worry. There was no hacks to deal with. Pokemon played great in this game. There's really no denying that. His team has the right amount of bulk support, the whole 9 yards, and he definitely deserves number 1 as far as I'm concerned. He has been the most consistent coach so far within this first 3 weeks of the season, and unless someone else can top him, I don't see anyone, at the very least at this moment, removing Pokemon from the top spot on my power rankings. So that's going to be the power rankings from us, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Also, make sure you're subscribed to everyone, to all the coaches in the NPA, and check out the channel. The playlist for week number 3, of course, will be in the description, all that stuff. So, till the next time, guys, this is Tone signing off for now. Peace out.